So, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Well done for remembering. I hope no one turned up last week by accident. Particular greeting to those joining us on YouTube, because I know we've got quite a few casualties and people who are struggling with ill health who said, I'll be on YouTube, but I can't come this evening. So, hello, Sally. So, yeah, welcome back. We're continuing exploring different ways to connect with God, encounter God, and deepen our relationship with God. If this is your first time here with us, then a particular welcome to you. I'm Nick, I'm the minister here, and it's my privilege to be leading us through. Okay, whoa, that's loud. Okay, thank you. I won't repeat all of that, just hello. Yes, particularly if you're new here, welcome. Lovely to have you with us. I'm Nick. We're over the 9 weeks of this course, we're exploring different spiritual pathways, different ways in which we can encounter God. And I've said every week so far, I'll probably keep saying it, there's no hierarchy of spirituality with these pathways. It's not that one is better than another. And you will find that you prefer some over others, and you will be different to other people. And that's absolutely how it should be, because we're all unique. We've all been created with different personalities, and I believe different spiritual personalities as well. If you do miss a week, or you're not able to get here, not only are we live streaming on YouTube, but you can also catch up on our YouTube channel if you click on the live tab. This week, our theme seems quite appropriate because we're just entering the season of Lent. And this evening, we're thinking about an uncomplicated life. I imagine there are lots of things that we'd like to uncomplicate about our lives. It wasn't so long ago that Marie Kondo made a big impact on people, and particularly on social media, with her advice on how to declutter your house and your life. Interestingly, she recently said that she's kind of given up on tidying since the birth of her third child. So it's all right if you've only got 2 children, but don't try it if you've got 3. This pathway is one that is leading us into simplicity and commitment. At its most extreme, it's the sort of pathway that leads you into a monastery or a convent, but I'm not advocating that this evening. Believers who relish this sort of approach will find that a well-organised, a less complex lifestyle opens them up to experiencing God's presence, and particularly engaging on their own as opposed to in groups. A word that may be associated with this pathway has taken on a really unwelcome political meaning. The word austerity makes us shudder when we think of it. But in this context, austerity has nothing to do with government cutbacks and reduced public services. It relates to things that are unadorned, simple, ungarnished, going back to the original roots of the word. In the book Sacred Pathways, on which this course is based, and there are a couple of copies available at the back, are they available for sale, Mike, or have they been ordered?
One's left there.
There's one book left at the back, okay? Gary uses the word ascetic, A-S-C-E-T-I-C, ascetic, to describe this pathway. But that suggests someone who's frugal, often seems to be someone who's severe, almost Puritan. And that doesn't really cover what I think this pathway is about. So that's why I've chosen to use the word uncomplicated instead. So let's have a look at some uncomplicated people in the Bible.
Yeah.
Often in the Bible, people head out into the desert, the wilderness, to live a simpler lifestyle. Interestingly, the wilderness was a place to go because there were no distractions. But even though you go into the wilderness to meet with God, Actually, the wilderness was seen as a place that was forsaken by God because nothing grew. It was bleak. Water was at a premium. Life was difficult. And the wilderness in the Bible was the place that the people of Israel spent 40 years walking around and, whoops, gone too far. And after they'd been freed from slavery in Egypt, they seemed just to go around in circles before they entered the Promised Land, which is another reason why the wilderness wasn't seen as the best sort of place to be, because it reminded people of those 40 years. Yet some people would go or were led by God into this austere place in order that they can spend time focused on him, free of distractions. Some of the prophets, people like Elijah, spent time out in the middle of nowhere and had an encounter with God there. There are also people in the Bible who took what was known as a Nazirite vow. Nothing to do with Nazareth. A Nazirite vow was a vow sometimes for a period of time, sometimes permanently, where those who'd taken that vow would abstain from alcohol, they'd abstain from cutting their hair, and they'd abstain from touching dead bodies. They'd keep themselves ritually clean. It was meant to be a vow of purity, of being set apart, which is what the word holy really means, to be set apart. It's a little bit like fasting in that you would do it because you wanted to dedicate yourself to God. Perhaps the most famous person in the Bible who took a Nazirite vow is Samson, the strong man, who took a Nazirite vow that was to last him his whole life until he got it wrong and sang Why, Delilah. You can find out about that in the book of Judges if you want. There's a book tucked away in the Old Testament called Lamentations. It's not one that's often read in church because it's quite depressing. It records the collective sense of abandonment and corporate depression that the people of Israel felt when their nation had been conquered and they had been deported, ultimately to Babylon, where they sat down by the river singing Boney M songs. Jerusalem had been destroyed. It felt like God had given up on them. And the writer of Lamentations is puzzling over the effects of evil and suffering in the world, the enforced simple lifestyle that those who remained were subjected to, because society had more or less disintegrated. And there is an element of lament in this pathway, calling out to God from perhaps a place of pain, asking God questions, or simply stating how rubbish things feel. In the Old Testament era, when people realized that their relationship with God had gone wrong, sometimes they would put on shabby sackcloth clothes and cover themselves in ash, sometimes even sitting on a pile of ash, as a sign showing God primarily, but also people around them, of their shame, their penitence, their anguish. They set aside wealth, comfort, luxury, and instead sackcloth and ashes to show God and other people how serious they were about the fact that they got things wrong.
Is Ash Wednesday tomorrow?
Ash Wednesday tomorrow. Ashing is linked to that. It was a demonstration on the outside of how they felt on the inside. Perhaps the most famous person in the Bible who lived this sort of lifestyle before Jesus is John the Baptist, the immediate herald for the arrival of Jesus. Some suggest he might even have been Jesus' cousin. He lived a simple life in the wilderness region in what is now part of Jordan and right near the river Jordan. We're told he dressed in smelly, itchy camel hair robes, ate locusts and wild honey. Didn't have his 5 a day. From there, though, people went out to him there, and he called them to turn back to God. He prepared them for the arrival of Jesus. It was a very uncomplicated lifestyle that he dedicated himself to God through. Let's have a look at Jesus. For someone who claims to be God in human form, Jesus lived a remarkably simple and uncomplicated life. It begins with him being born in an outhouse behind an inn in Bethlehem, and he kind of seems to continue with that sort of lifestyle. He grew up in Nazareth in the north of Israel. His earthly dad was the local carpenter, which wasn't a high status job. This is basically the local odd job man. You got something broken, oh, call Joseph, he'll sort it out. It's not a first century Thomas Chippendale making luxury, beautiful carpentry or joinery type things. It's rough and ready, hammer and nails. And it seems that Jesus followed in his family trade at least until the age of 30. Jesus never owned a house. Doesn't seem to have owned much at all, actually, other than the sandals on his feet when he began his teaching ministry. Jesus depended many times on the generosity, the hospitality of other people to support what he was doing. If you read any of the 4 biographies of Jesus, the eyewitness accounts that we call the Gospels, it seems often he went off on his own to pray. He'd find a quiet, secluded place and spend time praying. Now, because he was on his own, we don't often know what he said unless he told someone afterwards. But clearly he found that his relationship with his Heavenly Father needed these simple alone times with God. Some people even suggest Jesus was the first socialist, because he taught about the dangers of wealth accumulation. He seemed to teach a simpler lifestyle. He spoke of the dangers of wealth being that it can replace God ultimately. It can distract us from God. It can become more important than God. And we can spend our time and energy trying to get it or to hold on to it or to get more of it. Jesus said you can't worship both God and money. One of them will be more important. There are lots of things that Jesus said which seem a little strange to our 21st century ears. One of them is this: "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." You can find that in Matthew's account of Jesus' life, chapter 11, from verse 28. Now, a yoke is what you use to harness oxen together, to secure them to a plough so that they work in unison. But it was also a word that was used in those days to describe the collective teaching of a rabbi, a religious teacher. All of them would have different rules, different teaching, different emphases that they would say were important to try and get closer to God. And most of the time, it involved a whole set of additional rules and regulations. If you do all of these things, you'll be okay. And it was a real burden on people. The equivalent today might be if you go into a bookshop or the library and you look in the self-help section, there are loads and loads of different people saying, oh, well, I've got the secret. If you do this and this and this and this and this, then your life will be better. That's a sort of a yoke. So when Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, what he's actually saying is, my teaching's uncomplicated. I haven't got loads of rules for you to follow. Actually, it's really easy. And he seemed to go out of his way to tell people that not only were all of these extra rules unnecessary, that actually being religious can get in the way of your relationship with God. You could summarize Jesus' yoke as love God, love people. He taught a bit more than that, but actually all of it you could find in those two phrases. Love God, love people. He wanted people to have a relationship with God, and he wanted people to have a good relationship with one another. It's not complicated, it's an easy yoke, a light yoke. I'm going to pause at this point and give you a little bit of a break. If you want to go and have a top-up of tea or coffee, or there's a few bits of cake left, you can do that as well. Wait for it, Mickey. Sorry, you just looked poised. Sorry. Around the tables, or if you're watching this with someone, have a discussion. If you're on your own, then just have a think about this question. Is it possible to follow Jesus' example and teaching in the complex lives that we lead in 21st century Plymouth? Assuming the answer might be yes, how? Okay? Have a chat, have a discussion, come see what you can come up with, and then in a moment or a little while I'll come round and see what you've got to say. Okay?
Yeah, I was like, I didn't get a move.
Just as we conclude the discussion, there'll be another discussion moment a little bit later in the time. Can I apologise to those on YouTube? I've just realised that I didn't send out this week's worksheets to you. I'll do that first thing tomorrow morning, but you haven't got them tonight, and I'm sorry.
It's always been here.
All I can say is today my life was too complicated. So, does anyone have any thoughts, any reflections? Wave at me if you do, and I'll come over to you with a microphone. Ah, we have.
It's quite complicated to have an uncomplicated life in this sort of life. Like if you really want to go off into the wilderness and cut things off, that takes a lot of effort. It's not to say it didn't take Jesus effort, but yeah, it's a very different culture, very different world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. A very different culture and world we live in, which is why we're looking at it this evening.
There's a saying of you're close to God in your garden. For 3 days in a row, I've been able to get into my garden and do little bits. And we talked about nature and being closer to God in nature. I love pottery when the back allows. And I find it very peaceful, unless I'm really stretching. But yes, my mind is with the Lord when I wake up and I open the blinds and I'm looking out the garden and the fields behind and the trees that have now been planted by Plymouth City Council, right in my view. I just thank the Lord each time. And because I'm by myself, sort of 95% of my time, I can have very quiet times. I can have all day and speak to no one, or not go out. And yeah, I wake up with the Lord on my mind and just grateful. And of a night time, just grateful. And it's good to turn the telly off. But sometimes just listening to classical music, the nicer bits, just brings him closer to me, or me closer to him. And because I'm by myself, I haven't got any interruptions.
Yeah.
The fish are good as
The fish don't interrupt you. Okay. Sorry, yes. We can lift the volume up a little.
No.
And use your big voice as well. Anyone else?
I know that says love your neighbour as you love yourself. So like if you love your neighbour, you really want to harm them, as you really want to harm yourself. So God created them and you. So if you love them, then you obviously love God.
Brilliant, yeah. So a great example of loving God and loving people. Jesus said, love your neighbour as yourself. And if you love your neighbour as yourself, then you're going to get closer to God as well. Brilliant, thank you. And I think we can go home now. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. So, let's have an explore as to what this uncomplicated life might look like. Because as I was preparing this, I was thinking, yeah, it's all very well Jesus go off into the wilderness. But as Ellie said, we've got all sorts of commitments and we've got all sorts of complexities to our life that mean it's not quite so easy for us. And actually, the people who go off grid and go and live out in the middle of nowhere, for the most part, are thought of as being a little bit unusual, to be kind. So here are some thoughts about what we can do, and this is my homage to one of Sally's favourite bands, the title of that. And if anyone can tell me what the song is afterwards, then please do. So, a common way, or common theme of the simple lifestyle is finding peace in solitude, finding peace off on your own. We'll explore this more in the contemplating pathway that we come to later on in the series, But it's a big part of being uncomplicated too, so I want to unpack it a little bit now. You don't have to go off into the wilderness or the middle of nowhere. You just need to find somewhere you're not going to be disturbed for a little while. It could even be somewhere in your home. Some people actually quite like having a chair or a corner that is their special solitude place, their place with God in their home. Turn off your phone. Put away other things that may distract you. Take a few deep, gentle breaths and just try to relax. Notice your breathing in and out. Notice what's going on around you. Notice what you're thinking. And if you find it helpful, make it a regular time, a consistent time. So Monday evening is this special time, or whatever it's going to be. You may become aware of a sense of apartness. Marion spoke a little bit about when she's on her own. This special time is when you're not completely alone, because God is with you, but it's special time for you and for you alone. You've made this time and space to listen to God. It's holy space, literally set apart space. That's what holy means, remember? Don't rush yourself. Relax. Wait. If thoughts come into your head, oh, I haven't done ... Acknowledge them, write them down, so you don't forget them, and then think, oh, I can ignore that now because I can come back to it later. And then try and re-enter that holy space. Some people describe finding that in solitude they recharge spiritually. They find that the relaxation, the peacefulness, the gentleness, the aloneness gives them time and space for themselves. And they may not consciously have heard a voice from God or some words from God, but at the end of the time feel more alert, more alive, more in tune with themselves, more in tune with God. He's been at work. If you're the sort of person who really struggles with the idea of just having effectively a blank sheet of paper in front of you, not knowing where to start, then read the Bible. You could simply just open it at random, but there's risks to that, as we know, because you may find some really unusual bits that will confuse you. Start, maybe, by reading that passage from Matthew 11, verse 28, about that yoke, and what you think that means. Reflect on the sorts of things that Jesus says. When he says, for example, follow me. What does that mean for me today? Think about how he shares with us, making our burden light. I said earlier on that the word austerity is often associated with an uncomplicated lifestyle, a lifestyle designed to spend time alone with God. I call it chosen austerity, to distinguish it from the political and economic realities that are imposed. One of the things that uncomplicated people find is that when they choose austerity, when they decide that stuff is less important to them, priorities change. Beyond stuff is a life of generosity, because we're more ready to and willing to give away the things that don't matter to us quite so much as they used to. And it could be time, it could be even ourselves as well as stuff. In an uncomplicated life, you may find that you have more time. It may give you more time to do things in your everyday routines, but actually may also, if you make time, you kind of make a special time. You create space for God. When you're not just squeezing him in, but actually giving him quality time with yourself, you will find you've got space to breathe in as well. It's sometimes described as emptying yourself. Now, I'm not talking about ancient meditation techniques or New Age approaches to enlightenment or anything like that. It's simply saying that my priorities have changed. The stuff I used to be into is no longer as important to me as God. The things that I chased are not so important to me as the people around me. Satisfying my own needs and desires is not as important as helping others. Now, that might sound quite unattractive, but, and we'll see this in the caring pathway, in putting others first, actually we can find we gain so much more than we give. We don't do it to gain, but it's just in the amazing way of God's spiritual economy. The more we give of ourselves, the more we seem to get back from others and from Him. You could organise retreat days or prayer days. And if you want some help in doing this sort of thing, then going on an organised retreat is a good way to start, because you'll have someone there who can answer your questions and give you some exercises to do that will help you to work them on. If you just do a web search in any well-known search engine for Christian Retreat Devon, you will be spoiled for choice. I suppose the bottom line for why we do this sort of thing is that when we're silent, God gets a word in. When we focus on Him rather than ourselves, actually it's easier to tune into Him. Some of the things that I've been talking about in this uncomplicated pathway are called spiritual disciplines. They're ways of helping us to refocus on God. And routines can be really, really helpful. If you've not tried it before, if you've got a calendar or a diary function on your phone or your computer, how about you set up a recurring item, once a week maybe, time with God. Half an hour? Don't be overly ambitious to start with, but make sure then that that's not going to get deleted or move. If it has to move because something else really has to be there, move it. Don't delete it. And then set yourself a reminder so that it pings up to say, time with God. And you, oh yeah, I was going to do that. We've just recently started a routine of daily prayers here. And so there are 7 daily prayers. And in my diary, at 8:30 in the morning, I get a ping to say monthly daily prayer. And I've also put in the prayer for that day, so I don't have to go and look for it. So it's right there in front of me. It's just a small example.
And I don't like change.
You don't like change?
The last word is.
Okay. Take it tiny, tiny steps. I've talked about fasting in previous weeks and how the uncomplicated life, complicated to say that way, can be seen as a form of fasting because we're giving things up for God. As with all fasts, if you give something up for God, replace that with God. So if you decide you're going to have a TV-free evening, absolutely good, but dedicate that time to be with God, and it will be a double bonus for you. In Christian circles, time spent with God has become known as a quiet time. Doesn't need to be quiet. If you're on your own, you can make as much noise as you want, subject to your neighbours. There are apps that we've talked about in the past that you can have on your phone that will help you. Bible apps, Lectio 365 we heard about last week. You can use a website which will send you a daily email like Word Live. There are physical books you can get, and Mike can help you with daily Bible reading notes and things like that, and others. There's some books at the back that if you'd like to look at. Some of them are available free, is that right, Mike?
Yeah, there's a free one there. Yeah.
So don't just take it, check with Mike that that's the free one, but there are some books there you might find helpful. or go and visit CRP in Lipson and see what maybe attracts you. Christian Resources Project at CRP.
I'll try and remember next week and bring books of daily readings.
Brilliant. So next week there'll be some books of daily readings. If you're online, then what's your email address, Mike?
shops@christianresources.org.uk.
shop@christianresources.org.uk. Okay, thank you. Or contact the church office and we'll pass it on. Here are some more practical things that you might like to have a go at. Try praying instead of sleeping. Now, what I mean by this is that if you're anything like me, you wake up in the middle of the night and you might find it just a little bit difficult to get back to sleep. I don't know what routines you use to help you get back to sleep, but if you can't, why not think, oh, I'll do some praying then instead? And just start to think about what you want to pray about. Think about people that you would want to pray for. Think about your own relationship with God. Just talk to Him. Think about situations you've seen on the news. It really doesn't matter if you fall asleep during the praying. I think God would be rather chuffed if that happened, because it is quite relaxing. But it's a way of using up what otherwise might be quite frustrating space if you really can't get to sleep again. And if there's something that's really on your mind that's keeping you awake, well, there's a theme for your prayers. I've mentioned this before, but you can put reminders around your house, particularly somewhere you're going to visit often, such as the fridge. So you might find yourself a particular fridge magnet, or just stick a post-it note or something on your fridge, or wherever you're going to be, just to remind you. Pause. It might just be one word, pause. And in the pausing, stop and think, okay, is there something God's trying to say to me here? Or it could be simply a verse from the Bible that is important to you at the moment, that you just keep seeing and God keeps speaking to you from. I find that after a while I get used to these prompts. They kind of merge into the background. So either I change them or I put them somewhere else so that it's unusual again and my eyes notice it. A while ago, I had a meal with the monks at Worth Abbey in Sussex, and a friend and I went, and we had a morning on our own in separate rooms, but in the same area, just listening to God. And the idea was that we would have lunch, and then we would discuss together what we felt God had said to us. The monks said, "Would you like to stay for lunch?" Yes, of course we would. Just as we were about to go in, they said, "Oh, by the way, it's a silent lunch." We had never had a silent lunch before, and Steve, my friend, and I have the uncanny ability to set each other off giggling at a drop of a hat. So we decided we would sit as far apart as possible to reduce that possibility. What we discovered is that a silent lunch means you have to look out for the needs of your neighbour. You can't say, "Can you pass the ketchup?" So you have to offer the ketchup to the people around you just in case they might want it. You have to look and see, oh, their glass is empty, they're going to need the water. So you actually suddenly become much more conscious of the people around you. At the same time, there was this chap, the youngest novice monk, who was reading a book into a microphone. And it was a biography of Pugin. Pugin was an architect and stained glass window designer, very, very famous. But the way he was reading it, it sounded like he was reading Lord of the Rings. So it took me quite a while to work out what he was reading. And as we're eating, his voice kind of merged a little bit with the background. And all of a sudden, there was that loud whomp into the microphone. And he solemnly announced, "End of book." Out of the corner of my eye, as I'm trying not to laugh, I can see Steve go, and the monks killing themselves laughing at our attempt not to make a sound. Anyway, the point is, think about doing something silently. Think about actually sitting with other people, but in silence, so that you look out for their needs and they look out for yours. An alternative to it might be just to go walk around your community with your eyes open, thinking, what needs are here? How can I help? Thinking of the needs of others actually is a way of emptying ourselves, because we put them in place of ourselves. Just as a reminder, if you're going to fast from food, please make sure you drink plenty of water. If you're going to fast from anything, though, give that time, that energy, the resources that you would have used to God instead. Another form of living an uncomplicated lifestyle is to follow the rules. I'm not going to ask how many of you regularly break the speed limit, but one of the aspects of a monastic life is a vow of obedience, commitment to the rule of the convent or the monastery. And maybe just having a disciplined lifestyle helps you live an uncomplicated life. It leads to humility because you submit yourself to the authority of someone else. Now, ultimately, we submit ourselves to God, don't we? Unlikely, too, that many of us will be part of a religious order where we take a vow of obedience. But we could actually make a decision. You know what? I'm going to obey the rules around me so long as they don't compromise my faith. And one of the advantages of that is that you then don't have to think about it. So you don't have to think, oh, is it safe to drive at this speed? Because you're driving within the speed limit. And it helps to honour and respect others. If you excuse the nun pun, rebellious can be habit forming. If we are constantly rebelling in one area of our life, it can run over into others. But if we are obedient in some areas of our life, it can follow over into others and become a habit that we follow, ultimately a habit of following Jesus. I know I've said this before in a service on a Sunday, but the Hebrew word, one of the Hebrew words for work, is also the Hebrew word for worship, avodah. Work and worship, two sides of the same coin, two things that go hand in hand in the context of biblical Hebrew. So what about if we imagine, or more than that, actually actively dedicate the work that we do, whether it's paid or unpaid, paid in the workplace, in the home, in the community, wherever it is, we actively say, I am doing this as an act of worship to you, God. If you're doing it for God consciously, you'll do it for the best of your ability because you want to honour Him. And you take your God-given gifts, abilities, expertise, experience, talents, and you use them. And you know what? God loves it when we do that because He gave them to us in the first place. Think about how you feel when someone uses a gift that you've given them. That's how God thinks and feels about us when we use the gifts and talents He's given us. If we consciously think, this is for you, God, this is an act of worship for you, then actually the things that we do consciously include God. Now, as with all of the pathways, there are a couple of things that we need to be careful about. First of all, this is not an exercise in decluttering Marie Kondo style. It's not just uncomplicating or decluttering our life for the sake of it. If you've not heard about Marie Kondo, look her up on YouTube, and you'll be astonished at things that she tells you to get rid of. The purpose is not just to declutter, but to make space for God. To make it easier for us to encounter Him in this pathway. If we become so complicated, so concentrated on what we can do to make life less complicated, then actually it doesn't necessarily move us closer to God. So actively thinking, this is for you, God, I'm doing this for you, is a way of doing that. Fasting without focusing is just refraining or dieting. If you become absorbed into this pathway, there is a danger you can become isolated, because solitude is a big part of it. So don't push everyone away from you in your attempts to spend time with God. Balance is really important here. And it's also, according to the book, a danger that some people become so absorbed with this that it's all they ever talk about to anyone else. And eventually they push people away and they wonder why they're lonely. One of the things that Jesus criticized was that sometimes people do things as if they're trying to gain favor, gain points with God. If I go on enough retreats, if I fast often enough, if I have a daily quiet time, he will be pleased with me and he therefore will bless me. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not how God works. And we can become slightly self-satisfied because of all the things that we are doing. And if we do, actually, we kind of lost the point. Jesus says, if what you are doing is for your own reward, you've got that reward. If what you're doing is for God, then your reward is in heaven, he says. God is not marking us on a scorecard. Now, this week, bearing in mind that we're thinking about an uncomplicated lifestyle and solitude, I haven't got anyone to share. Because finding solitary people isn't easy, because they're all off being solitary. So I'm going to share very, very briefly about my own experience. This is not something I find easy. I don't naturally tend towards this. But I know that the times when I have gone off on my own on retreat to spend time with God have always ended up being really special times. Now, having said solitude, let me give you a slight get-out clause for those of you who are thinking, nah, not on my own. I've started spending a morning once a month with Tim Parkman, who's the minister at Saltash Baptist Church. And actually, that's this Friday for me. And what we do is we go for a walk, we talk, and then we pray about what we've talked about. But it's time that we give to God. And it's simple. It's uncomplicated. We turn our phones off, so if you want me on one of those occasions, you'll just have to wait. And we just spend time with God, with each other. So if actually the idea of being off on your own really just makes you go cold, you could do it with somebody else. You could do what I did with my friend Steve and go off on a retreat together, spend some time on your own, and then talk about it together. So, bearing in mind that there's no particular testimony, no particular statement from people up here, I'm going to suggest that round the tables again, you have a chat. I'm not going to take feedback on this, but so what you say won't necessarily, well, won't go beyond the table. But how can you make your life more uncomplicated with some of the things I've talked about? Have any of them felt, oh, yeah, I'd like to try that? Or have you had any experience of this sort of thing? If you have, can you share them with one another? Don't think there's any more tea or coffee. Not really. No, we won't bother making any more, but just have a chat, and there is a little bit more cake, if you're really desperate. We will come back to just the final part of our evening by my watch in 7 minutes. Okay? So if there's anyone left on YouTube, this is, we brought you back in just because you haven't got the sheets, but give you an opportunity to know some of the things we're doing. You might want to take some and adapt them at home. If you want any of these things, if you're here, at the end of the evening or during the evenings, there's lots of them. You can just take the bits of paper home with you. If you're online and you want them, let me know and I can email them to you. One of the spiritual exercises that people have been doing for centuries and centuries is walking a labyrinth. Now, a labyrinth is different to a maze. A maze has lots of dead ends. A labyrinth is one path that follows a winding track through to the middle, and then you reverse and go back out the same way. And some cathedrals actually have a labyrinth built into the floor. So Chartres Cathedral in France, for example, is a very famous one. What I have got here is not a full-blown labyrinth, because I didn't have time to set one up and there's not a lot of space. But I've got here a finger labyrinth. So over there's some sheets of paper with this labyrinth on it, which is quite similar to the Chartres labyrinth. And basically you start just running your finger through the path. But don't go fast. Go really gently. You don't have to push hard, but just follow it through. There's some guidance and instructions that you might want to follow to help you on your journey, just into the middle, to spend a little time with God, and then take that back out again. Okay? And on the back, there's a lot more guidance about these, so if you find it helpful, you can take that away with you. So the labyrinths are down there. If you're online, you can download this one. If you do a search for finger labyrinths, I got this one from a Church of England diocesan website with permission, he says. Or you can get it from www.pilgrimpaths.co.uk. Okay. Over in the middle, between the two pillars there are a whole load of envelopes. What I've done is I've printed off the background pictures that have been behind all of the different slides this evening, and then I've chopped them up to make some sort of jigsaws. So, the suggestion I've got for you is, take it back to your table, pull out one piece and write your name on the back of it. That represents you. Then do the jigsaw on your table. It'll be A4, just as a clue, and they're all portrait, just as another clue. Sorry, landscape. That's landscape, that's portrait. They're all that way. But each piece, as you're putting it in, think about what that might represent in your life. Aspects of your life, things that are part of who you are. It might be home, it might be work, it might be all sorts of different things. It might be people. And just think about how you might be able to either hold less tightly to those things, or how you might be actually able to hold them very loosely. How important are they in your life? Where does God fit into that? So pick up one of those envelopes. There are two sets of all of them, but don't have a rummage for your favourite picture that you've just seen, because there's only two. And I haven't labelled them, they're all blank, so just take one at random. Over here, there are some breathing prayers. No, they're not, they're over here, breathing prayers. So, ever since you were born, you have been breathing. And Richard Rohr, who's a Roman Catholic priest who's written a lot of books around contemplation and so on, he suggests that actually the name of God, Yahweh, is actually two breaths. A breath in, so because the way it was originally written in Hebrew, there were no vowel sounds, so it was just YHWH. So it's So your first breath in was Yah, and your last breath out will be Wah. So you're constantly saying the name of God every breath. That's what he suggests. So there's some breathing suggestions there. You might just want to sit and breathe in, Yah, and just repeat that. I've also put there the fruit of the Spirit. And so you might breathe in an aspect of the fruit of the Spirit, and then breathe out kind of the opposite. And saying to God as you're breathing in, I want more of this in my life, and as you're breathing out, I want less of that. So that's the breathing exercises. Posture prayers, I think they are over there. Just where you're sitting, and you can do it anywhere, but just where you're sitting for the time being. So guidance on how you might use your hands to help you to communicate with God. I'm not going to tell you too much about what that looks like. The instructions I hope are fairly clear. If you've got any questions about it, if it's not clear, let me know and I'll try and explain it. I have got here, they're over just in front of the screen, some frames. So these are meant to be Polaroid pictures, Polaroid photographs. Okay? Remember that Jesus' simple yoke, his easy yoke, love God, love people. So the idea is that you pick this up and you put someone in the middle of it. So you might have people doing this towards you. So you put someone in the middle of it, and underneath at the bottom it says, loved by God and loved by me. So you put that in front of that person and say, you're loved by God and you're loved by me. You don't have to say it to them, but you can be thinking it and just take it around. I did think of us using our mobile phones into doing that, but there's all sorts of questions about whether anyone should have their photo taken or what we do with them and so on. So these are non-permanent photographs, okay? But just an exercise, loved by God, loved by me. If you want to, you could take this home and stick it on your mirror. And then when you look at yourself, you can say, I'm loved by God. And actually, yeah, and I'm loved by me. I recognise my own innate value. Okay. This is why I didn't have time to send out the sheets, because I've been working on all these things. Over there, nearest the pillar, no, it's not near the pillar. Over there somewhere is the narrative of Jesus telling the story of the rich fool. And then what he goes on to talk about. So you can read that, and then on the back there are some questions that you might want to ponder about what Jesus was saying and what that means for you. Over the other side of that pillar is a little wooden bowl of 1 pences. You can take a 1 pence piece, take a sheet of paper, follow the instructions on there, and reflect on money and what it means in our society, what it means to you. And then at the end of the exercise, if you like, you can place it on the step just next to the cross over there, and the sheet will tell you what you might like that to symbolise. The one that is by the pillar over there is a suggestion that you go for a walk. Now, not walking around here, in your imagination. Think of a walk that you really like doing, that you know really well. It might be a walk from your home to the shops. It might be a walk in the countryside, something that you can imagine and remember. And go for that walk and follow the instructions on that sheet in your head. I think that's all of them. As I say, you can take these pieces of paper home with you if you want to try the exercises. If you haven't had a chance to do them all, you can take some. There's not enough for everyone in everything. So if you think there's something you'd really like to try now, I know there's plenty of the finger labyrinths, and there's plenty of pennies and other bits and pieces, but if you've done something and there's not many sheets of paper left of that, if you can put it back so someone else can have a go, at the end you can take whatever's there, and if they're right enough, let me know and I can send it to you. Does that all make sense? Okay. I hope you will find these things helpful. Can I just ask that this evening, I know normally we have a lot of conversation and chat and so on. This evening, let's try some solitude. Okay? So, if you want to talk around the table, please do, but muted voices. And if you're with someone on the table and you actually want to do one of these exercises and you want to do it on your own, no one is going to be upset with you. No one's going to take umbrage and think, ooh, if you take your chair and you just move somewhere on your own. And can I ask, if someone is on their own, particularly if they've got their eyes closed, don't go and talk to them. Give them that space. Okay, we will go until about 9:15, if that's all right. So, see what God says to you.